The reason criminals have no respect for the enforcement of law in this country is because there is no proper enforcement of law, so they don't regard what Parliament has put in place. Our Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, that's a quote reported from him. They don't respect law enforcement because there is no proper law enforcement, to paraphrase. An interesting thing to say. An interesting thing maybe to admit. The Prime Minister, of course, is debating the issue about has Parliament basically done enough? And this stems from statements or observations he made about a lack of convictions under certain acts. In this case, the Firearms Act. Now, just a small segue, I do wonder if, to some extent, this has something to do with the potential policy that we don't necessarily know about with regards to FULs. I don't know if that's tied to his lamentations about no charges. Or conviction, sorry. Funny how I'm not too sure if he had similar concerns about the anti-gang legislation not necessarily bearing any fruit. But was this a Freudian slip? Was this a frank admission of a lack of performance? And the Prime Minister further on to lament to say, right now there's no real understanding of that by the population. The national narrative is deficient or deliberately misleading. Now, assuming these two statements were not taken out of context and jammed together and were not said separately, what part of criminals not respecting law enforcement because there is no proper enforcement of the law does the population not understand? I'm pretty sure that's more or less a given that everybody understands that. Is it about the fact that defense lawyers will do their best to get their clients off? And maybe I'm taking his statements out of context, right? It's not always easy. When you see a report, yes, the report kind of gives it a certain context, but even then, sometimes the context of the speaker and what the report frames it to be is not always the same thing. But that statement, that quote, if you just take it at face value, the admission that there's no proper enforcement of law. Well, whose fault is that? Because the Prime Minister is trying to defend government's actions in Parliament. All right, cool. But to some extent, aren't you the one who oversees the National Security Council? Is there a whole Ministry of National Security? Why is there then no proper enforcement of law? Is there some further explanation to this quote that maybe you could provide us? Or is this similar to when, I believe it might have been the Minister of Finance, tried to defend our blatantly obvious porous maritime borders by saying, well, no. All of the illegal guns, they're really coming through the legal ports of entry. As though somehow admitting that our control of our ports is so lacking that somehow that would be better than our borders being open, because the net result is the same. Not only is illegal contraband coming in, including the guns and the ammunition and the drugs and so forth, but then two, law enforcement or border security, whatever aspect of it, apparently is a failure. And I do wonder if this is a similar situation where the Prime Minister is maybe trying to defend the type of legislations that deal with crime Parliament has passed by inadvertently admitting, well, yeah, but we actually kind of dropped the ball with regards to making sure national security is actually done. Like I said, maybe I'm taking it out of context. But it's interesting that the Prime Minister has made that statement. What's the phrase? You cut off your nose to spite your face? This might be my new favorite quote of all time. Of all time. Because that it also literally pulls the rug out of every time the Minister of National Security and the Commissioner of Police and anybody else says, we will redouble our efforts. This type of behavior, this violence will not be tolerated. We will deal with it. We will deal with them. We will come out in full force. Blah, 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 blah. For all intents and purposes, they might as well be the teacher in Peanuts Gallery. I do really wonder what really was the thought process behind these statements. Because there's a part of me that just can't believe that the Prime Minister said it. And to be clear, the quote includes the phrase, in this country. He wasn't speaking about somewhere else. And therefore, you know, that is why we kept the Commissioner of Police in place. That is why we are not looking to make any major moves in national security. That is why there's little to no apparent or transparent accountability in the various other protective services. Because I guess apparently the Prime Minister doesn't seem to identify on some level the issue of proper enforcement of law not existing. And regardless of what the actual context was, or the meaning was, or the intention was behind the other statement, right now there's no real understanding of that by the population. Maybe the article is misleading me on what he is speaking to when the population does not understand subject matter. Whatever that is, maybe the article implies a wrong that. It's misappropriating his words. But regardless, just that quote alone makes me wonder, does the Prime Minister really have an understanding about the reality of crime? If he could make this statement in his defense. Again, maybe I'm wrong. Someone could clue me in. But to me, it also seemed kind of obvious. I don't know if he thought this was a revelation that will somehow unlock the key understanding of the fundamental secrets of the universe that is Trinidad and Tobago's crime situation. The reason criminals have no respect for the enforcement of law in this country, because there is no enforcement of law, so they don't regard what Parliament has put in place. And why would they? Who cares about what laws Parliament does? It doesn't matter that there's a death penalty. Not only can we not actually get anybody to the execution block, but we have a 10% detection rate. And if you have for murder, and if you have a 10% detection rate for murder, guess what? For 90% of murders, it really doesn't matter what the law says. We can't get them anyway. That's the harsh reality of the situation. And it seems as though the Prime Minister conveniently wants to not remind people that he's the head of the National Security Council in this moment in time, based on what he said. I think that's a fair assumption to make. He's only trying to defend the Parliament's decisions or lack thereof. All right. I have harped on this interesting utterance by the Prime Minister for too long, but there are other utterances, actual stories and developments. So let's start off today's Daily Review. And it has been reported that, well, the Prime Minister read, apparently, excerpts from a letter sent to him from Indian businessman Naveen Jindal, where Mr. Jindal has said, with great disappointment, therefore I must address the reaction led by the official opposition party following our visit. The character assassination experience merely for considering the investment opportunity was deeply disheartening and discouraging. Moreover, the unjust attacks directed at our groups, companies, entities that operate independently are unconnected to legal matters. From an organizational point of view, these actions by the purported government in waiting raise serious concerns as they represent an element of risk and potential instability. This is from Mr. Naveen Jindal. So he's pulled out. Although I do wonder, to what extent did they look at the situation and were leaning on the let's not do this anyway? Because the situation for the refinery is not so easy to make work. So there was always a chance where he would actually look at the situation, crunch the numbers, and say, no mas. But he sent a letter to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is apparently quite upset by it because we've lost an investment opportunity. The opposition has run a potential investor. So much so that the Prime Minister decided, well, he asked the question, should we close down Paria now? Because nobody should be doing business with Paria because the DPP says there's possible criminal conduct to be looked at. That's what the Prime Minister said. He's questioning the validity of the opposition by trying to compare Paria to a businessman in India who is technically already facing corruption charges in court. Now, first of all, I have to say this is an apples to oranges comparison. Paria is not yet before the court for criminal misconduct of any kind. That investigation is still be taking place. Meanwhile, Mr. Jindal apparently had to get court permission to travel because he's under proceedings currently. Now, also, Paria is an entire entity. Mr. Jindal is one person. Why is the Prime Minister comparing Mr. Jindal to Paria when maybe he should be comparing Mr. Jindal to people in Paria? Now, granted, I say the standard is innocent until proven guilty. So I did say that the situation, it's not so straightforward, my initial commentary, which was weeks ago. But why compare it to all of Paria? Why not compare it to, I don't know, Paria's management or maybe Paria's board? Now, here's the thing. The Prime Minister, when it came to the SSA, they didn't even wait for criminal charges. They fired people anyway. Off the top. Replaced Major Best. Didn't wait for the DPP to say anything. Apparently, his investigations into the situation was enough to say, well, there was an attempted coup, so I had to remove people. Why shut down Paria? Why not just remove the board? I mean, you did it for the SSA. You could do it for Paria, not so. 4 men dead. And based on the Commission of Inquiry, the liability for not conducting a rescue, even if it's not criminal, at the very least in the court of public opinion. How easy it is for you to try to sell the population. Oh, there's nothing to say. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. How Paria is being operated is fine. It's all above board. Nothing wrong happened. No. One could argue, if this was a different jurisdiction and if the board weren't political appointees with connections outside of just their appointment to said prime minister, they would have been replaced long time. In places where the population would not tolerate this degree of ineptitude combined with political patronage. Because again, 4 men died, and you know, by all accounts, based on the Commission of Inquiry, there's some very serious questions with regards to how that entire crisis was managed, so much so that the chairman of the board couldn't string 2 convincing words together to at least placate the fears of the population as the situation unfolded. Because political appointments, they weren't hired to actually have to deal with crises now. That's why they had to call a new minister. You know, why are we expecting things from political appointees to rise up to special occasions that demand more of them than just collecting checks and Lord knows what else they're doing? I don't know. I just know that for the Paria situation, they didn't do much. And yet, somehow it's fine that they get to assess compensation. Anyway, that's a secondary point. The thing is, I don't agree with that this is a fair comparison in the first place. Because then it goes back next to the opposition. Senator Wade Mark, I believe, is basically dismissing his criticism out of hand. And, you know, I hate to say this because I don't want to sound like I'm a hater with regards to the whole situation. Not that I have any special bias for or against the opposition. But, yeah, what did you expect? Why is it unreasonable for the opposition to question any sort of business dealings the government might have with someone who is before the courts of his own country about potential corruption in a similar enough situation? Because I would hazard a guess that if the roles were reversed, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley would be the first one to bring up the fact that government is attempting to do business with someone who has serious questions about the legality of their conduct before the court, not just allegations, not just a potential criminal investigation. It was enough that apparently the court said, hey, let's go through this process. Now granted, again, he is still technically innocent until proven guilty. So it's not to say that he is guilty, but at the very least, I did not necessarily see any sort of extra behavior. Maybe it's because I didn't seek out a lot of the political bubble surrounding this, but for the most part, what was reported at the very least, I think is reasonable with regards to, should we not question a deal of this nature? Is it not within the public interest? And then, yes, on some hand, I understand Mr. Jindal pulling out. But the flip side is, this is all it took to get you to pull out? Come on. Really? That's it? I mean, you didn't expect this going in? You didn't think that the political opponents of the person you want to shake hands with would not ask questions about an active court matter? This isn't India now. Our media doesn't have to behave like how your media behaves, if that is a relevant point. Just saying. And neither does our opposition. So I'm kind of wondering, like, what's going on in this situation? Why are people why are people so weak? Why so weak? This should have been factored into the equation from the start. So it makes me wonder if there's more to this deal than meets the eye. But we'll never know because apparently it's kaput now. But again, unless there's something that I'm missing here, for the most part, I have no issue with anybody bringing up these questions about this deal. And like I said, I suspect the Prime Minister would have done the same thing. And I would have agreed with him if he did. Speaking about the Prime Minister. Apparently, the Prime Minister does not want to speak on Venezuela. And then he went on to warn about any sort of outsiders who attempt to forcibly change the government of a South American nation only asking for trouble. I get that. It's kind of funny how that's technically not officially on the table by anybody just yet. Military intervention is just one of those things where it's not that it should never be done, it's just that it should almost never be done, mainly because it's just about almost never done right. But I get it. The Prime Minister doesn't want to declare a position because we have deals and he doesn't want to anger either side, because then what if the side he angers ends up on top in the end? That will make life a lot harder for what is already an economy that's going to make life very hard. But I think it's almost like if he's putting the cart before the horse. Because the real issue should not be, A, people want to intervene, outsiders have an agenda and attempt to forcibly change the government. No, what's already on the table is technically what the government is trying to convince us is not going to happen, in that sanctions could come down the pipe. Now, if you're alluding to the fact that people are going to forcibly try to change outsiders, going to forcibly try to change, forcibly implies physical violence to change the government of Venezuela. Why would sanctions, or rather the dismissal, the denouncement, the removal of our specific licenses not be on the table? Why would they not be on the table if you're warning about people forcibly changing the government? More importantly, the Prime Minister wanted to compare our situation when the opposition disagrees to what's happening in Venezuela. And I think to some extent that is not something he should be saying. Because we're not talking about, oh, the opposition disagree with the results. We're talking about, in part, organizations from the country whose licenses we are depending on, whose mind we are depending on for them to not change their mind. They have said, well, we can't be confident that these elections are free and fair. And while it's not as though we could send the TTPS in as if they would do any good anyway, to deal with Maduro, let's not pull the wool over our eyes and say, well, just because we have other interests, we're going to somehow try to spin this as a morally right position. There are serious allegations of election fraud. It follows a pattern of behavior. And now, anyone who sits on the fence or potentially supports these allegations, if proven to be true, they run the risk of basically being someone who has revealed to have no true consideration of the principles of upholding democracy or the democratic rule of law, because it wasn't convenient for them to do so at the time. It's interesting when your agendas and principles clash. What decisions do you make? Therein lies the true revelation, potentially of character. Again, because I say it's allegations. It's allegations. So it takes a lot more context and information for us to get to actually saying that to be the case of the Prime Minister. But what I'm saying is not that his character is lacking, but he runs the risk of the perception of it being so if these things progress further. And again, I would like to point out that if we found ourselves in a situation that apparently many Venezuelans find themselves, we ourselves might be the ones asking for foreign intervention. I'm already asking for foreign intervention about the crime situation and our inability to secure borders. So, you know, just saying. In fact, if Maduro wins and Venezuela decides they want all of Coquina, Mannequin, and Manatee, we might need foreign intervention because we can't defend any Coast Guard to defend our interests. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll continue on with the review for a little bit. Then we have the ASP later. Stay tuned. This is Talk About WSN, the content capital. We'll be right back after this.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Nah, you don't need to register nothing. You don't need, we can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug.
You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward. if it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God. So we kind of at a stalemate.
You'll focus on the woman who's being the victim,
right,
or the man is being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI. Worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
Welcome back to Talking Point, and a couple of stories I want to get into before I welcome the ASP. First of all, Tutor is warning about a teacher shortage coming up at the start of the next term. Listen to this. Listen to this. Apparently, the interview process was compromised. So now the Teaching Service Commission has rescheduled interviews for the position of Teacher 1 for between August the 12th and September the 30th. That's September 30, the end basically of September. Meanwhile, the new academic term begins on September the 2nd. Now, the Teaching Service Commission, apparently they are trying to deal with a backlog of people that are acting Teacher 1s before they hire new people. On some level, there's some practical sense behind that. But the flip side is, Tutor, as well as other stakeholders, are warning about the fact that, look, we have had retirements, we have had deaths, we have had turnover, basically. And the delays to the process means that when we get to September the 2nd, we might have a shortage. Martin Lumpkin, president of Tutor, described it as an acute teaching shortage. The denominational schools, at least one of them, are basically saying that, look, we have issues with how the ministry or how the Teaching Services Commission is filling their posts. But then when the Minister of Education is trying to say, well, look, there are things that we could put in place, substitute teachers, denominational schools could look to the merit list to get teachers to fill vacancies. They're saying, hold on, this whole merit list thing that you're providing us, so that this process, it ain't working for us. So to say that we're going to go now and rush to try and fill vacancies before September 2nd, this ain't a good look. We're not happy with this situation. Now, the thing about it is, at the end of the day, it hasn't happened yet, right? We're projecting based on, to some extent, common sense. If you have a process that's going to end potentially September the 30th, chances are it's not going to be ready for September the 2nd. That's just kind of common sense. But to say that it's going to be an acute shortage, how bad the fallout is going to be, we can't necessarily be sure. That said, the education system already has a lot of issues. The last thing that you need is another issue. And then on top of that, there's no guarantee that the whole situation would be sorted out by September the 30th anyway. It actually could technically fall apart and get worse, although that's highly speculative. But given how education kind of goes in TNT, I don't think it's completely unreasonable to at least not throw the possibility, no matter how small it may arguably be, out there. More importantly, there are long-term issues with regards to teaching, selection, shortages, etc., as well as resourcing the schools, maintaining the schools, renovating the schools, and opening scheduled to be reopened new schools. Oh, and then there's, poor performance of some teachers. Let's not forget that, as well as potential curriculum issues and disciplinary problems. And there's probably other things that I'm forgetting with regards to our educational deficiencies, but I'll leave that there. Moving on to our next story, and this might be connected to what the ASP has to speak to me. Kumal Maharaj, went missing for a couple of weeks. It's something that I declined to comment on until there was more information forthcoming besides the fact that he's missing. Don't necessarily want to use talking point to comment on every subtle little crime unless there's something pertinent to the national discussion. And I think this is pertinent. Reports are that he was kidnapped and taken to Venezuela. Although I do think there's at least one stakeholder group that has questioned these claims. Apparently, his release was negotiated with the guidance of the police, and he was released by, well, being thrown into the water close to shore south of Trinidad. Now, granted, he could have still been held in Trinidad. It's not guaranteed that he was held in Venezuela, just that how he was released, and this is, I guess you could say, understandable, obfuscates the situation. But right now, that is what is being believed. That's what the family believes. If it is true, the implications are alarming. Even if it's not true, it reveals potentially a degree of sophistication that, well, it makes me wonder if our criminal justice system is operating with way too much archaic laws and procedures in order to keep up with this situation. And just before we get to the ASP, I do want to mention this next story. This is not necessarily anything new, but the police have also put out a warning with regards to criminals targeting people doing businesses at banks. Apparently, they have looked into this situation. They have investigated the various matters that have already occurred. They have warned, listen, this is apparently more sophisticated than you think. They have specific strategies and with regards to how they conduct things, and it's not necessarily, as what was speculated in the past, an insider in the bank providing information, which means that, again, the implications are potentially frightening. We can't take our safety for granted. Now, we don't necessarily know exactly what the strategies are, but it does point to the fact that, listen, the gangs can employ sophisticated and strategic thinking and critical thinking to conduct the nefarious activities, oversimplified pronouncements to the media and strategies and old school tired strategies. Probably not going to work for the most part. But at the end of the day, it is good that the police is seeing some headway into this matter, into investigations into this matter. It'll be a hell of a thing if not only is crime affecting businesses, but directly affecting day-to-day banking. That's going to make things real heavy with regards to business operations. With that said, we'll end the review here, and I will welcome my guests for this morning, Acting ASP Ashraf Ali. It's good to see you once again, sir. Thanks for joining me.
Good morning, Sean, and it's good to be here again.
And I do believe the topic today was with regards to missing persons.
Yes.
So I do wonder if there's more insight with regards to, well, the general proceedings of what happened with the case that I mentioned, with the gentleman who was believed to have been held all the way in Venezuela, abducted in Trinidad. I mean, a case like that, if it's true, hopefully it's a one-off, but if it is true and it's not a one-off, that could be a problem.
Well, firstly, the issue of missing persons have been an attention of the police service for some time now. Right? So, and there's a lot of misinformation across the board as when it relates to missing persons. Right? Specifically when persons come and report that it has to be 24 hours before they can report a person missing. There is no such thing as 24 hours. There is no time frame for persons
That's television.
Yeah, I don't know. They just use that and then they come across. Once you come to they go to the police station and inform the police that your loved one or somebody that your family member or somebody that is missing, and you, the individual, deems that person to be missing. How you deem that person to be missing is that probably that person has a timeline to come home. That person accustomed calling in advance, informing you where they will be, and you of the opinion that listen, this is not the normal trend of the individual. It is not that that's how my family member operates, and no communication has been made to the individual. You did some due diligence in terms of you yourself communicate with everybody that you believe that individual may or may not have been wrong, and you do some due diligence, and you're not getting any feedback that you need. In your opinion, you may say, hey, that person, I'm worried now, I'm worried and concerned, and you come to the station and they say that you're making a report of a missing person. That is where the process starts. So there's no time frame for that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not even an American thing. It's literally just a Hollywood thing.
Yeah, right? So when you come to the station, you will be interviewed and asked specific questions that we need to get some more information to work with. They may ask, if the person frequents a certain location, how often this person has been, if the person ever did it before, or if it's the first time, was the latest the person may have been out. We ask for a photograph of the individual so we can do some circulation on our social media platforms and ask the assistance of the public. We also ask the individuals and family member concerned to assist us by communicating with as much persons as is possible, to share the information on their social media platforms, also to find out if this person is actually missing or not.
Right, so basically spread the word,
yes.
And maybe someone who sees them or might be in contact with them could then send it back that everything is fine, or spread the word, person is missing, look out.
So in our internal processes now at the station, we would send that information and relay that information to our anti-kidnapping unit. The anti-kidnapping unit is they store that information, and they are the data collectors of that information, and they start the process from the perspective of possible kidnapping. If there's a possible kidnapping, and they don't classify it as a kidnapping, it's just that they go through the processes of interviewing the person again and getting as much more information as they need to go a little further.
Sometimes that's helpful, right? If you re-interview, you could kind of make sure there's no inconsistencies, or maybe the person might remember something the second time they didn't remember the first time.
Exactly. So that is how we started. So we start the process along that line. If the person within, let's say, 24 to 48 hours, 2 or 3 days goes, and there is no information forthcoming as to the whereabouts of the individual, we also step it up as also sending information to homicide, right? Because there's a possibility that it can be a homicide.
Right, and let's just pause there. A missing person, it could be a homicide, it could be a kidnapping, it could be that they have, tried to avoid contact with people that they know for whatever reason, or it could be they had an accident, slipped and fell off a bridge, slipped and fell off a cliff. Yes. No one saw them, no one knows that the accident happened to them, and it's just one of those things that eventually they might be found, and maybe not, they'll put the 2 and 2 together on what happened.
So this is the process as to how we deal with it. Now, there's a lot of data being placed out in the public domain as to the number of persons by other entities putting data out as if it's their data, right? And I want to make it abundantly clear. Based on our records, that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Office has for the last 6 years, 2018 to 2023, we had 4,184 persons recorded as missing, right? Out of those missing person records, 3,748 persons have returned home safely. We had 178 over the 6-year period, unfortunately, was deceased.
How many was deceased?
178.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. And the ones that we found deceased was varying circumstances, right?
Natural causes, accidents, murder.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was
across the board, wide range,
various circumstances, and 258 was still outstanding. The reason why some of them is outstanding, sometimes you don't get any feedback from the family member, close relatives as to what is going on with it.
Could it be that they were found, but no one reported to the police that they were found?
Sometimes persons left the jurisdiction and we don't have any information about them.
Oh, right. They could have run abroad.
And sometimes we don't have anything at all in the fact that the matter remained run cold. Now, we have dealt with missing persons previously because it always keeps to come up, always seems to come up, and the narrative that the police is not doing enough. The challenge that we have is that the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago gives you the right to privacy. Mm-hmm. In some circumstances, we have minors going missing. And when minors are returned, we cannot publish or share information as to the circumstances surrounding the missing persons. We also have persons who would have been missing, who are adults, who are missing, and the circumstances, as a matter of respecting the individual's privacy and constitutional privacy rights. Yeah. We cannot publish the circumstances as to where they were and how they were, but once they return home safely, they return home safely. That causes a lot of challenge, because it appears that the police is not doing anything, because sometimes you get a report of a missing person and then all of a sudden the person has been found, and the narrative in between is a lot of speculation as to what is taking place. Mm-hmm. Within this figure, there are persons who are multiple offenders of running away. There are persons who run away who miss number of times, but every time they come to make a report, it's a recorded report. So it matters not if they have been a repeat offender in terms of running away on a regular, running away 3 or 4 times, sometimes 3 or 4 times in the year. We get persons who have been missing, reports of missing, and when you look at these circumstances, is that these teenagers and sometimes teenagers, young adults just went missing. Mm-hmm. They're not missing in the context of missing, but they just went to a location and then afterwards they show up.
Because every now and then, some of the missing teenager stories, they're like, yes, and then they were discovered, like, I think there was one case with some girls, they were discovered in close proximity to where they went missing from. Yeah,
so they would have been in other circumstances, and from the missing person investigation or the report of a missing person, that will be closed off because the person is returned. But the other investigation as to where they were and what is taking place would continue, because they may be minors, and there's other investigation taking place with respect to where they were and the circumstances of where they were, right? And this is the context in which missing persons are dealt with. Sometimes we keep asking the public to come forward and share as much information. Sometimes we even get challenges with the family members who refuse to give information.
And that's one of the things that I always find interesting. Sometimes you might have to ask insensitive questions.
You do.
You know, like, so-and-so is missing. He was known to frequent certain places of ill repute. And you might need to have follow-up questions on that. You're not just like, oh, so he visited whatever. I don't know why I don't want to say
you may get in that whole figure with that 4,000 plus that we had for the last 6 years, a number of persons that had issues within their personal life.
And they're potentially running away from...
And they decided to take, want of a better word, a cool down.
Right. They just want to escape for a little while.
Yeah, and they returned home, and the officers would have interviewed them and asked them if everything is okay, and they would have said yes, X, Y, and Z. And as far as it's concerned, they didn't consider themselves to be missing. Yeah. They just didn't want to be found by they didn't want to have interaction with their families and all kind of thing like that, because of some issues. There are a lot of scenarios within that and circumstances with this missing person. How, unfortunately, it is not information for the public domain about the individual's personal situation.
But not just that, sometimes the family might be reluctant.
And
you know,
yes.
they're like, he's missing, why are you asking us about the fight that we just had? And from the investigator's point of view, you could be like, maybe he ran away because of the fight.
Yes. So I will give you one or two circumstances that there was recently we had a report of, we found an individual, an elderly gentleman, who seemed to have Alzheimer's.
Right.
Right. From way up in the east, right, as far as Arima, close to Arima side. He was found on the highway in the Beatum, walking on the highway. Officers on the highway patrol observed the individual and brought him to the Besson Street police station. And there was no documentation on him that we could have dealt with it. Well, we got a letter from him with a potential name, with some documents on him, and we had to do some follow-ups. That same night, there was no report of missing person, but the concerns of the officers was that, listen, this gentleman should not have been here for so we were there.
No one where he was knew him.
No. So we started to do some calls, and then when we called, we found out that we did some checks. We got a name of an individual, and when we called that individual, the person resides in the Arima, up in the Arima Talahokada area, within that area. Only to find out that, yes, he was missing since morning, early in the morning. That was around 6, 7 o'clock in the afternoon. And since early in the morning, they were looking for him. But they did not make a report of a missing person because they realized that that is not something that he would have done already.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, they would have checked all the institutions and everything like that. And then when they received the call, then they realized, okay, the person was missing. And then they communicate with the police. And to our, we were glad to know that the family members knew it is. We actually escorted, we took him and carried him back up to the station where the family met with him and carried him back home. That is one circumstance in which some of these reports fall into the category also. Right? So with all that 4,000, there are persons who would have had medical conditions and also was reported missing. So there's a lot of analyzation of the data to actually determine the circumstances of the individuals and what these situations are. So that's just one. It's not saying that is all, but there's a lot of things to be dealt with respect to that. Now, persons, I just want to say that I just want to commend this Hunter Search and Rescue. They are an NGO that does a lot of good work, assisting the families. However, it's unfortunate that when they present data from not the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service perspective, but from their own perspective, that doesn't augur well with us sometimes, because some of the data they presented recently shows a very big disparity in the number in our records and their records, right? So we just want to ensure that when the public is using the asking for assistance at the Hunters Search and Rescue, they do a good job, but when you read the most recent report with the last missing person, Kamal, the reports indicate that he communicated with them. The question is why he didn't communicate with Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and inform them.
As in the victim or the family?
The victim.
While he was...
Well, that is what it said in the report. So sometimes we want this when we don't get that information, we cannot react or we can't respond to it because they communicate with an entity that we don't have information about.
I think this is something that people need to understand. It's not like, we know there's crime, but how many of us witness crime happening right in front of our eyes? And now think about it. Why do we expect the police to always literally be 5 feet from the crime so they could see it firsthand and respond with first-hand information, as opposed to someone has to report it, whatever it may be.
Yes.
It could be domestic violence. We've had this talk already. It could be missing person / kidnapping. It could be homicide. Whatever it is, if no one reports it.
And this is where we have the challenge. It's unfortunate that when people make statements of this nature, they believe that the police is not assisting in the manner in which they want. I could understand that, right? Because it takes a lot of resource to deal with a missing person that is not really missing.
Right.
And to deal with an individual, because we don't make assumption that the person is not missing.
Right. You'll have to assume the worst.
Yes. So once you make a report of a missing person, we treat it as is, and resources are being used to treat with that.
Because I know in hospitality, one of the things that's unfortunate is you'll have guests, they don't want to inform the business about something that's wrong, the hotel or what have you, right? Because they don't want to complain. They don't want to come across like they're complaining. They don't want to do anything unnecessary. You know, it's fine. You know, we could tolerate it. The problem is, you know, sometimes the situation can get worse. So in the case of a restaurant or a hotel, a leak might get bigger. In the case of a missing person, it might go from, oh, well, maybe he just got lost for a couple hours to, oh, full-out kidnapping and there's a ransom demand and whatever. Or he had an accident somewhere isolated and the rescue needs to happen as soon as possible because, you know, the risk to his life, the exposure, the injuries, and kind of assuming that it's not so bad. I don't want to put the police out. I don't want to cause all these resources to be expended only for him to walk home. Yeah, I just went for some ice cream and I forgot my phone or something.
No, well, in both sides of it, we don't take it for granted, because that's the positive side if the person did in fact do that. The police service has no issues with that. But it's the level of communication that you share with the police. Sometimes when you call to get a little feedback from the family, did you hear anything about, did you communicate with the family members? No, officer, we are talking to nobody. That is for all you to do. I mean, that is being very ridiculous, because it's your family. I don't know your family circle. I don't know the circle that's individual.
Particularly who in the family is closest.
Yes, as well as I don't know where the individual goes or how many locations he. So we expect that you do some work for us, because you are saying.
Well, it's not really work for us, but it is.
No, it is literally it's a partnership, because at the end of the day, the objective is to ensure that the individual who has been reported missing returns home safely. So it benefits both parties. Right?
Yeah.
It benefits you because your family member returns home safely. It benefits the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service from that perspective.
I think the key is, the key point is not who does the work. The key point is to get them safe as soon as possible, whatever that might mean.
And the uniqueness of a missing person, it means that the family members or the associates of the individual is missing has to work very closely with the police, because there is a lot more intimate information that you have to share for us to possibly find this individual.
And I just want to point out, each scenario technically will have its own response. If they had an accident and they're missing, well, you need a whole search of all sorts of different areas. That would be different than if they were kidnapped, or that would be different than if they ran away for a cool down.
Well, yes.
Now, we got to put a pause on the conversation. I need to take a break first. We have a caller already waiting on the line. When we come back, we'll also open the phone lines and try to continue and conclude the conversation. Stay tuned. This is Talking Point on WESN. We'll be right back after this.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Welcome back. So a caller decided he didn't want to wait, so we have Digger Martin on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Good morning, Mr. Small and the senior officer there.
Morning.
This caller will wait because I have some direct questions to the senior police officer.
Lord.
I read on one of the dailies yesterday that a DCP by the name of Mr. Benjamin, you know what he said? There is an increase of 3% in the murder, and it's not alarming. So I want to know if the TTPS has normalized a 600 murder rate for Trinidad and Tobago. If that is the case, then heaven have to help us. Imagine a DCP saying there's a 3% increase from last year, and which we probably the projection is 600, and he appears to be comfortable with that. That is the one problem. The other problem I am seeing a supposed gang leader who is on bail and who was charged and who is one of those alleged members of one of those 6 or 7. He's a singer. He went to St. Martin. He was shot. How can a person who has been charged and on bail on serious offense allowed to leave this country? Does he have to have permission? Does he have to have some sort of connection? Because what appears now is that a lot of resources is being used to bring him back. I'm not too sure if they're bringing him back to Trinidad or they're sending him somewhere for medical attention. That raises some serious questions. And I'm again asking the TTPS to intervene with a civic responsibility. And I'm going back. I've drove on that overhead in that overpass in Chaguanas, and it's a disaster waiting to happen. Nobody appears to be concerned about that. So I'm asking you to send Sergeant Batson, who is the one who looked after traffic accident. Tell him go and see how dangerous it is. It was pouring rain, and I had to go to Point Splitters, and I saw it again. Visibility was about 30% lower than what it normally, because rain was pouring. Anybody who goes down into that sink, into that gully, will lose control of their car. I'm going to say no more. I'm gone.
Thank you, Carl. Now, I'm not too sure. International flight risk, I don't know to what extent is the police's call to allow that.
So the thing about it is that persons need to understand that the public needs to understand the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has no control of when an individual goes on bail, what the magistrate puts as bail conditions. They deem the bail conditions necessary. We can make inputs. We might indicate that the person is a flight risk, and the person may want to abscond, and then they have consideration as to the bail requirements that his passport would have been suspended or taken away. However, in the circumstances of this circumstance, the person is not found guilty, right? And whether we like it or not, the person is an entertainer, and the courts would have looked at all of these circumstances and determined whether or not he or she, and I don't say whether an individual, he or she would have been a flight risk or not. That is the requirement. That is the purview of the court, right? And that is where they would have made a decision.
But also, depending, unless you have some other systems in place, it's not that the police could physically just watch everybody out on bail to see if they're going to go to the airport to catch them in the act.
Well, exactly. So this is not the first time that an individual who would have been placed before the courts has the passport to go and come as they feel fit.
Because if he's not guilty yet, right, by denying him his livelihood, his international aspects of his livelihood, you potentially are punishing him, and then he could sue the state afterwards if he's found not guilty.
Yeah,
and
so
we see how that goes.
We don't deal with that.
Okay, we have Tuna Puna waiting on the line. Good morning, caller, you're on the air. Good morning.
Hello, good morning to the panel.
Morning.
Yeah. My concern, and I think most of the population concern of Trinidad and Tobago, is that if we have enough security officers, police officers, the defense force, whatever, who are involved in protecting our nation, if we have enough of them, that they will be able to cope with the influx of people coming in, who will be coming into this country, because we are feeling very insecure. We already have so much crime, so much is taking place. I don't know what will happen to our people. And if we have enough jobs and food and all these convenience to take care of all this situation, I would like to know what will happen to our people, because right now our own people cannot get jobs. Another problem is we have a lot of our people who are at the poverty line suffering very, very much, because we do have a lot of people who come and beg us and ask for help and all sorts of things. I would like to know what proper security will be put in place to save our people. Please, thank you.
I would just say the first agency in line would be the police, in theory. In practicality, the first agency in line would be the police, because there's no other agency to stop them from coming here.
Then we have the issue of what is our responsibility as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. We can discuss that one just now.
That's a good point. See something, say something. If you don't, then you are potentially abiding by it, aiding and abetting. We have San Fernando on the line. Good morning, caller, you on here. Caller, good morning.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, ESPRD.
Morning, sir.
ESPRD, let me start with you this morning, this good fine morning. You know, I always listen to the professor talk about the police supposed to enforce all laws, right? I went on the TTPS website and I was looking for something which I think I need to say to you, and you need to deal with this. I went to the TTPS website to find to see if I could find all the who are the present hierarchy of the police service, all the DCPs and at that level, and I was not able to find that on the police on the TTPS website. It mentioned the commissioner, and that was it. There is no part of that website that says who are the present hierarchy in the service. That being said, I found on the website it actually says that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is there to enforce all laws. So it actually says that on your website, that you all are supposed to enforce all laws. That being said, Sean, let me go to what you said, what you spoke about this morning. And let me zoom in specifically with that issue with the Prime Minister's letter that he claimed he got from Mr. Jindal. You know, I could understand Mr. Jindal's talking about reputational damage. That was the same thing when the Sanders was trying to do that business in Tobago. When Sanders pulled out, there was an interview with Arthur Lockjack. Arthur Lockjack said he had spoken to Butch Stewart, who he dealt with, who is a friend of his. And Butch Stewart expressed to him the reason he pulled out, in addition to all the negative publicity that he had in this country. And he said he didn't put a brick down as yet, and he had all this negative publicity. He claimed that one of the main reasons that he had pulled out was there was an election coming up. And if it is that the government had changed, he was not sure that he could rely on the present on the opposition at the time, which is the same opposition now. He could not rely on them to fulfill the deal that he would have signed with the other government. And that is, you see, that was the main reason he pulled out. In addition to his reputational damage, he said, because he said we have to look after our family business. That never happened when Sanders went in any magnitude when they went to Grenada and when they went to Grenada and when they went to St. Vincent. So I understand that, and I was surprised that you, who was a member of a family business, would not understand that how reputational damage can affect a business and a family business at that. That being said, Sean, my last point is the issue with the Prime Minister. I've been no comment on the Venezuela issue. I am in agreement with the Prime Minister. We can't just be willy-nilly commenting on this issue. We are between a rock and a hard place anytime it comes to Venezuela and our situation. Because Venezuela is the closest we have to a deal with that tied to the country's future. We have no such serious arrangement with the two other people you all talk about as CARICOM nations who have oil and gas, Suriname and Guyana. We have no such arrangement. Guyana don't want us to get involved in the business as far as they could keep us out. Suriname, they have to be very cautious because we, Trinidad and Tobago, had a reputation in the Caribbean. People seem not to want to deal with us. So we have to tread carefully. So I don't blame the Prime Minister for saying no comment on Venezuela, not answering anything about that. Have a good day, gentlemen.
Thank you, caller. I'll just say this. You're right. And I would have agreed with the Prime Minister if he kept it there. If he just said no comments, but he went on. And I guess you could say I was wrong, at least in part, if not further, in that I should have been more specific in my criticisms. Don't bring up about outside powers or whatever, because you're right. That's the most important reason, at least to us, with regards to why he cannot just shoot from the hip and make pronouncements and proclamations. So you're definitely right about that. I can't disagree with that. It's just because he added more to the argument that didn't have to do anything about that. With regards to Mr. Juntal and Sanders, I don't think it's a direct comparison. It's kind of hard for me to say, well, the opposition should not bring up the fact that he has a corruption case before the courts in India. You see, like, I understand what you're saying, but on principle, that's kind of, the flip side is not so easy to digest as well. So therefore, what is the proper compromise in that situation, if it should be compromised? We have St. Augustine on the line that's been waiting. Sorry, good morning, caller, you're here.
Hello?
Morning.
Yeah, morning. I just had two things to talk about. One was the guy who was on bail and went to St. Martin, as far as I was hearing, and that he was shot. He had a bullet in his brain and was waiting in St. Martin to be brought back home. And he was brought back home, and he had surgery here. As far as I know, I thought that the police would know that. I don't know. But it was on the news that he was brought back I suppose, by the government. And he was operated on because he had a bullet in his brain. That is one. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, to make a contribution about, was the missing persons. Because again, the SP is talking to us in numbers, large numbers, 4,000, and percentages and so on. For the purposes of proper policing and getting things right, what we need to get in these things are numbers. The police continue to give us percentages of things, well, 2% and 3%. If we had one murder last year, and we had only 2 this year, then we have increased by 100%.
Yeah.
That is what we want. If we are doing serious policing, then we would want to get the numbers. how many were and in what categories, how many in each category. That is what we want for proper planning. So when they give us these percentages, I don't think it's correct. Thank you.
All right, caller. I mean, I don't know if the ASP, with what the ASP provided for us was in percentages, but I do understand your point. I think outside of the ASP's presentation today, yes, there are times when statistics can be quite misleading, depending on how they're framed, etc., etc. So I understand that, and sometimes what details are omitted. But I guess we could take the time.
So I understand the caller, what this caller is indicating there, and it's something that when you have to present the information as I told you just now, if I were to go through the 4,000 plus over the 6-year period and bring the statistical analysis of it.
Or maybe he was saying, maybe the problem was you were generalizing with some statements.
No,
you weren't able to give us outright, accurate, like.
So I give you the accurate figures. These are the accurate figures we have here over the 6-year period. So if I want to break it, if just to share for this caller, specifically in 2018 we had 785 reported cases, right? As compared to 2023, we had 569.
Okay.
That's a decrease of almost 200 reports. So I can break it down. I can analyze it. I could break it down. I could give you the percentage decrease.
No, but I think there were some things you were saying that a lot of these cases with this or that. It's not as though this is not a PowerPoint presentation with an hour-long press conference.
Exactly. So it's going to be hard for me to break that data down specifically to each individual report and where they're categorizing.
Okay, we have San Fernando. Is there another San Fernando? Or Arima, sorry? Arima, on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Morning.
Morning.
I want to address the officer on the panel this morning.
Yeah.
Now, I want to tie it into a statement that the Prime Minister also made, right? Now, for me, respect builds trust, and trust builds confidence and loyalty. So the police service right now, they have a hard task. But it's not insurmountable. They could overcome it. And why I say so, remember the Prime Minister that just Emancipation Day? When he talk about black people should be respected, it should be that we should have more respect for ourselves. And if we do that, and the police do that, I think they're going to have a handle on crime. Because when you watch the video with the lady taking the cell phone out of the taxi, that was shameless. And it's not that we should be respected. We should be respectful of ourselves, have more respect for ourselves. And if Trinidadians live that way, crime will be a thing of the past. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. I mean, the flip side to that is the violence has a callousness, which I think it's along the same lines of what you just said there, a lack of respect. There's a lot of implications to that statement, but I think there's a core principle there that's probably very, 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 very true. We have another caller from San Fernando on the line. Caller, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, sir. Good morning to the officer there.
Yeah.
Now, I have a question for him and one to you. One for him would be, can he tell me in the last 5 years how much big fish was caught? I don't want the names. I just want the amount, like if it's how much. And in what category. Now, let me just take out the last two with the AG before the court and that kind of thing. But I want to know how much big fish. Because every day we're seeing statistics with how much borders we have and how much this we have and all kind of thing. I'm not hearing nothing about that. So he was telling me that, right? Now, in your case now, in your section now, the press have a duty of care to represent the people. That's the fourth estate.
Right.
Now, when politicians and they start on these statements, it is expected that they will ask the questions for us. And I don't know why nobody in that realm didn't get up and say, hey, now, Papa, everybody's saying, we're showing you proof that Mr. Jindal is before the courts. What you nonsense you talking about? You know about that and you know about that and kind of nonsense. Hey, it's real money you're talking about. I know your refinery. And besides that, we already see where it's going. Now, mind you, my own take is, I don't care if Venezuela get a refinery or if you buy oil from Venezuela, because 80% of the problem in Venezuela is the U.S. fault. Because when they put sanctions on the people who are suffering, not Maduro, then we are seeing trouble because of that. So, really, before I born, people from Venezuela come into Trinidad and they shopping and going back. The nice people coming in, all about the working in Trinidad. You understand? So, just ask the officer, please. And if he could tell me the last Commissioner of Police, Gigi, he had a direct line, you could have called him, right? So ask him if Tanti Ola have a number that we could call her. Please, thank you.
Thank you, caller. We do have another call from St. James, I think. Oh, we have one before?
Yes.
Hi, morning, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, morning. Yeah, morning, gentlemen. Great program. I just wanted to have an idea if the user force policy affect the use of batons and pepper spray and tasers. And I asked that too because of how the two WPCs was in PTSD the other day, and I had to call for a bystander help. And I look at law programs, and TV and reality is two different things, eh? But looking at programs like Law and Order and all these other programs here, and all these programs for years. But let me get more real. Cops on TV, on the cable channel, cops visiting people, they're getting calls for domestic problems. It's so that pepper spray and a baton and the taser really help these officers, and they had to answer any court for nobody dying and how much people police kill and all this kind of thing. So are we internationally, I still have to say it, even though it's a simple thing I'm seeing worldwide, all these youth officers, at least half of them on a raid have batons. And when crowds, when you go on crowds are posing you, when you go to with a warrant for somebody, and these guys who open their mouth and the women out there, and they see your teasers and batters hanging on you, it does something. It does something, and I have seen this because I went to things like Panorama Pan competition for years in the Savannah back in the 70s. And batons, man, it played a great part in the behavior of people. And if they didn't have that, they didn't have no pepper spray and taser, all they had was gun and batter. And that had the public, when you approach and you go to raid and they see these equipment and I tell you, they're holding back from the way they're behaving. And it keeps back, it hinders the police work. So I'm saying police officers, the women, had a taser pepper spray down in PTSD, this gentleman would have probably had to go and face an unnecessary charge today. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. You want to start with that first? Because I just think it's the same thing where it's people taking it for granted, less lethal.
It's the same thing. We do have policies, and even if you discharge your pepper spray, utilize your baton, you still have to answer a question.
Because misuse of these items could lead to bad situations.
So you discharge the pepper spray, it's still within the use of force policy, because after you discharge the pepper spray, we have a duty of care to ensure that the person seeks some medical attention, because we don't know how that individual is going to react.
Right.
If you discharge the taser, it's the same principles. You have to ensure that the person seeks medical attention because of we don't know how the reactions.
Now, if you want to arrest me and I'm not violent with you, can you use those items?
So
because there might be circumstances where you can't.
So the baton is an extension of yourself, extension of your arm. It is used as a non-lethal, but in some circumstances, if you wield a baton in a proper manner, it can cause some
permanent injuries,
serious damage, because you're not allowed to hit an individual on his head with a baton.
I think the key thing is people might hear the word non-lethal or less lethal interchangeably, and I think on a technical level, at least in some jurisdictions, they've settled on less lethal.
Yes.
Because there are circumstances where all three of those things can lead to death if misused.
Exactly, and that's why we use that escalation parameter in that your firearm is the last to draw. Because that is pure lethal.
But that doesn't mean that you could be quick to draw pepper spray. You can't be quick to draw it either.
And there is a lot of, there's a lot of things that happen in an engagement that it needs to escalate. Sometimes the escalation is so fast that the officer does not have the time to go through the entire stages, because the situation becomes so volatile at the same time. The situation with where he's talking about two female officers who was dealing with that situation. Unfortunately, the situation was in fact not dealt with the way it should have been dealt with. Right. And that caused a lot of controversial issue in terms of executing an arrest. If you know you're in a situation and the arrest is not, you don't have control of that situation, you call for assistance. Calling for assistance of the general public is one aspect of it. And that was already a controversial issue. That matters before the courts. We wait to hear how it come out, because it would set out a different precedent for utilizing that part of the law. And that brings to the question of, when people continue to use the word, we need to enforce all the laws. If we enforce the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, some of the laws in Trinidad and Tobago are very archaic. It does not work in 2024 in our current environment, the way it was structured for when it was structured. Using it now gives a different, will change the intent.
Because this situation with WPCs, you could argue this is a very literal interpretation of the law.
Exactly.
Or at least one interpretation of the law. So for them not to do so would be exercising judgment to not technically enforce a law.
That law has been in existence on the books of Trinidad, the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, for a number of years. It has not been utilized, but it's a law. So sometimes we have to be very cautious by using the word enforcing the laws. It's very, very challenging in some of the laws that is currently existing on the books, whether or not when it was developed, the intent of that law at that particular time, whether or not in our current environment the intent could be suffice right now. So they may have something we need to do revisiting some of the laws on Trinidad and Tobago, but at the end of the day, there's a whole set of conversation and a different exercise that has to go through with not the police service alone, but other stakeholders with respect to the laws.
I now realize we are way over time.
Sure.
So I know you might maybe have some closing thoughts with regards to missing persons that you might want to leave us with.
Yes, so generally I just want persons to know that there is no time limit to make a report of a missing person, 24 hours. So don't let anybody tell you have 24 hours before you come and make a report. In 24 hours, and I'm just using the word 24 hours to just highlight this, in 24 hours, a lot of things can change. So a missing person, in the context of what we are talking about, the nature of the individual, where the person would have gone, all of that, time is of essence. So you realize that your family or somebody close to you, someone is missing because of how they normally behave, and they have not conformed to the normal behavior, it's outside the norm, make a report. Ensure that when you're communicating with the police, you give as much information as is necessary and answer all the questions that the officer is asking you. It's not that they just want to pry into your business, but all this information is going to help or assist in locating your loved one, because your objective is to get your loved one back home safely. Right? And again, Sorry to say, but Trinidad and Tobago, we still have problems with social media and persons going on the places like Marketplace and these other social media platform, dating platforms, and being victims of crimes. We're asking you all, please do your due diligence. We cannot come here every time and just keep on reinforcing and reinforcing. Sad to say, but people have a saying, if you're not listening, you will learn, you know. You will feel, and some persons are feeling by losing their property, and in some situations could end up losing their life. So let's don't wait for that part of it, right? Please listen to the messages that we continue to send to you all.
ASP, I haven't heard that saying in a long time, but it feels as though I think it's a true adage that we unfortunately just love to forget and test. Caller with the two questions, the basics of it, I would say you're right. Sorry, we don't really have time to answer them. I did intend to, but we're way over time now. So I want to thank all our callers. I want to thank the ASP. I want to just remind people to make today a good day, as my colleague Mr. Shaw would always say. Remember our allegiance to each other and to our republic. Stay safe. We will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
This is 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
Hello there, and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. Before we even start this repatriation and reintegration process, we've already failed, or are we doomed to fail?
You've got to invest in the institutions that you've established to carry out those sorts of core functions.
We now get into the regional updates to give you an understanding of what's happening across our neighboring islands.
We have available a number of films that are worth showing.
So it was day one when the French Revolution started to develop the concept of universal human rights.
What happened this time is unprecedented. It's one of the largest terrorist attacks in history.
Let's welcome Carl to the program. Carl is over there next to himself. Hello, Carl.
silky anteater or pygmy anteater, and we have 2 of the 3 species of anteaters right here.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break a balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have 2. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the game.
not no.
Let's go to the last part.
Speaks the name of her former partner, refusing to give any further recognition to the man who made her suffer so much. She spent 15 years in a toxic relationship, during which money would increasingly be used as a weapon against her.
I was 13, 14 years old. I was making some money and I would treat him. We'd go to the movies and I would pay for his seat. Same for the restaurant. At first I did it willingly, with even a sort of feminist spirit.
But as the years went by, her boyfriend would demand more and more money. If she refused, he would verbally abuse and even beat her. At age 25, while pregnant, she discovered the true extent of his financial manipulation.
I started getting regular visits from a court officer, and I realized that he had taken on debt. Loans applied for online using my identification, my signature.
90,000 euros in debt, the young banker was forced to quickly file for financial protection.
I remember that I would get out of work at the bank and then I'd go to pick up food stamps because it was the only way I could eat and buy baby formula and diapers for my daughter. I asked my partner for an explanation, which I didn't get. I knew he was violent and I was afraid.
She would eventually find the courage to file charges against him, 30 of them, and move out. He was given an 8-month suspended prison sentence. He died several years later. Economic abuse. It leaves no bruises and frequently passes unnoticed. To raise awareness of the phenomenon, a feminist association created this fake ad for a fictional app, allowing men to control their wives' spending.
Ah, c'est génial. Dès que ma femme doit faire un achat, je suis alerté. Je peux transférer toutes ses allocations direct sur mon compte. Ah bah tiens, elle veut payer son abonnement de bus. Ah mais y a pas moyen, je refuse. De toute façon, on s'aime. Donc ce qui est à elle est à moi.
This non-profit hears from domestic abuse victims every day, and money is often part of the stories told.
These are men who take the government's family benefits and keep them on their own account, who forbid their wives from having their own accounts, from having a job.
Depriving a woman of financial autonomy, even forbidding her to work to make her dependent and better control her. This woman experienced it firsthand.
One night he tied me up as I was sleeping. He took a rope, tied me to the bed and went off to work. He knew that I also had to go to work. He even turned off my phone so that I couldn't be reached.
She would lose her job and eventually flee their shared home. Jessica Stefan went on to become an advocate for victims, raising awareness among bankers. According to a recent poll, 41% of women have already experienced economic abuse.
Next to Japan, where authorities have enforced a crackdown on so-called host bars since the beginning of the year. These are clubs whose male employees trick women into spending large sums of money to drink and spend time in their company. Victims who believe they're in love with their hosts are left with massive debts, forcing some to turn to prostitution to pay them off. Our team on the ground sent us this report.
In the streets of Kabukicho, a red light and entertainment district in Tokyo, Yu still struggles to see herself as a victim of unscrupulous host clubs.
Coming here makes me nostalgic. I'm starting to think, I want to see him again.
The 44-year-old was a regular at host bars, places where women pay to spend time with a professional charmer. But like many other women, she was deceived by one of the industry's modern-day Lotharios.
Every day, we would message each other. He had a key to my apartment, and we would visit regularly. We used to do things together outside the club. We even went to Disneyland together.
Host clubs are legal and can be found in cities across Japan. Women run up large tabs buying expensive wine, champagne and cocktails. The more they spend, the more the host earns. At the end of each month, the clubs list the names of their highest earners. Yu says she spent a total of 180,000 euros to drink and spend time with the same host.
I had millions of yen, but I spent it all. He told me to go make money abroad, so I went and worked abroad.
Yu, who ended up working in the commercial sex industry, is still paying off her debts. The clubs insist their employees do not have sex with their clients, but it's impossible to know what happens off the club premises. An estimated 6,000 men work as hosts in Kabukicho, a small neighborhood that's home to around 300 clubs, a magnet for tens of thousands of women.
We meet women who are unhappy with their daily lives or who want to find love. They can breathe here.
Many host clubs, which have been around since the 1960s, are now under the spotlight for the wrong reasons. In recent months, local authorities have carried out inspections to establish whether underage female clients have been encouraged to buy and drink alcohol. Some of the women left with heavy debts after multiple host club visits are under 18. One, aged just 15, spent 35,000 euros in just 4 months.
The neighborhood will be cleaned up. Only certified hosts will be working here. Until recently, there were too many places employing men who were good at acting cool, but they only wanted to take advantage of women.
This man, a familiar face in Kabukicho for many years, has reached out to victims and their families. Terrified parents visit his office to seek help. Some have lost touch with their daughters and are at their wits' end.
They go to their daughters' apartments, see they haven't been living there for some time. They find business cards belonging to hosts and fail to find their daughters. That's when they come to me.
Gen's organisation says it takes about 5 years for women to realise they're the victims of host club entrapment. He tries to warn people of the dangers of visiting the clubs, but says the government needs to step in.
We want women under 25 to be barred from host clubs and for the clubs to stop running tabs. Clients should only be able to pay in the same way they do at regular restaurants immediately, and by cash or by credit card.
While the police insist they're taking a harder line against serious cases of exploitation, especially those in which indebted women are forced into prostitution, the government seems reluctant to introduce tighter regulations. Last November, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida condemned rip-off host clubs.
In addition to cracking down on illegal activities, such as violations of the Anti-Prostitution Act and the Employment Security Act, we will provide measures on entering host clubs and strengthen consultation services.
But Kishida's government has not introduced new measures to tackle malicious host clubs. Other officials have taken action, though. Host clubs in Kabukicho said they would stop extending credit to clients from April, following informal discussions with the local mayor. Campaigners are sceptical. They say host clubs are unlikely to abandon a tried and tested business model based on a verbal agreement with local authorities. After all, hosting and deception are a seductive and lucrative mix.
Now, women are among the new faces patrolling the streets of the Somali capital Mogadishu as traffic police officers. It's all part of efforts to increase the number of women in public roles amid a security crackdown.
On the bustling streets of Mogadishu, motorists are met with an unfamiliar sight. Female traffic police helping to keep things moving. New recruit Samira Abdullah is trained to clear the city's notorious traffic jams.
I tell drivers, work with us, and we work for you. Correct your mistakes. Most of you are good, and we urge you to correct the mistakes you're making.
The new officers are part of the Somali capital's efforts to increase the number of women in official public roles. Until recently, such a job would have been off limits, as the country's conservative Muslim traditions relegated women to administrative desk jobs. Samira, though, says her presence on the streets has been met with open arms. Some Mogadishu drivers, meanwhile, have their own reasons for supporting the change.
The male traffic police are mostly looking for bribes, but now there are good female traffic police officers who check licenses and observe and implement law and order.
The shift in attitudes is partly one of necessity. Somalian authorities are rushing to deploy more personnel, part of a wider security crackdown in the wake of recent attacks by the Al-Shabaab militant group. A government offensive against the jihadists has meant new job openings in the security sector that officials say women are filling capably.
They work well. They've inspired more new women and given them the opportunity to join the traffic police. So now we have many women applying. We want to sort them and then train them.
Though the country remains deeply conservative, the presence of Samira and her female colleagues on the streets of the capital could point to evolving roles and rights for Somali women.
And that's all for this edition, but in the meantime, we would love to hear from you. So do reach out with your suggestions via Facebook, Instagram or X. So until the next show, bye for now.
Special event. From July 26th to August 11th, tune in to France 24 to follow the Paris Games. Our teams on the ground will be reporting in 4 languages. Follow all the action, the results and the medals. Watch the interviews, the events behind the scenes, the reactions. During 2 weeks, France 24 will be meeting supporters from around the world to hear their stories, hopes and dreams. Paris Games, from July 26th to August 11th on France 24 and France24.com.
trust is our most precious asset. Every day, around the world, France 24, RFI and Monte Carlo Doualier join forces to bring you free, independent, verified, balanced information that fights manipulation, and in 21 languages. France Média Monde has been awarded the Journalism Trust Initiative Standard, which guarantees the professionalism and reliability of our international news media with a score of 100%. Trust is not automatic. It must be earned and cultivated. Thank you for your trust.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.
WESN.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for joining us, as usual, here on WESN. People's Political Choice. That's a new political party or an organization trying to get our attention in Trinidad and Tobago. It is headed by a young lady named Cassandra George, and she says she has ambitions of being Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. She says change is here. She's agreed to speak with us on this edition of the program. Good to have you, ma'am. Good to see you.
Hi, morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, let's look at, you know, this is not a name that I was familiar with at all. I can't remember how I came across this flyer, and I looked at it, and I see somebody saying, you know, the PPC, you know, People's Political Choice, and this is for people who will embrace it to say, I support Cassandra George as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and you say change is here. And like I said, I didn't know a thing about you, and I was trying to look some stuff up, and I put the name in, and one of the things the first thing that came out was the University of Dundee. That is you?
Yes, it is.
Okay, well, let's start with that. Dundee in Ireland. So let's talk about who is Cassandra George?
Well, Cassandra George is a single mother of 4 boys. Four boys, you know. I'm unemployed. I'm a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, and that's it, you know.
Wow. I mean, what gave you the ambition, the idea of wanting to be a political leader and to stake a claim to be? So you have to win an election, you have to have a party that wins an election to be Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and you set out to do that. Let's talk about that.
Well, I think that the first thing that triggered me to be a political leader was the death of my father, you know, and that death kind of shook my core. And you know, I started off with a woman scorned. I was angry, very angry. And you know, first I wanted to start off with a radio program. And you know, I remember I was traveling with a taxi, and I was telling the driver, you know, how hurt I was, and that, you know, I wanted to start a radio program. And he told me, he said, well, the way how the system is, that wouldn't work. He said, they will try to buy you, they will try to do you all kind of thing.
Who's it the?
Well, the system, the government, the people on top. And from there I said, you know what? I am going to chop their roots. I am going to start a political party. And because at that moment I realized that as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, after coming out of slavery and indentureship, the only freedom we had was to choose a leader to represent us. That is the only freedom they give us, to choose a leader to represent us. They say, okay, it's 1.5 million of you all cannot come collectively, but you all could choose individuals to represent you all.
Yeah, so, well, we didn't start off with 1.5. We got to that point pretty recently in the country's development. Yeah, but however, how much the number was at the time,
yes.
Talking about independence and so on.
Yes.
1963. Yeah.
So the idea of the political party was formed, you know, I decided to name it People Political Choice, you know, whereby you're giving people a choice to choose. You know, the first time we could choose, because if we don't choose, we'll be in a difficult situation, a very difficult situation, and that's how the political party started.
Outside of this flyer, like I was saying, I can't remember where I picked it up, how it ended up in front of me, but outside of this, there's nothing one knows about the People's Political Choice. There's nothing one knows sort of vicariously about Cassandra George.
In 2020, I launched in Trinidad and I launched in Tobago. The media.
2020?